actually doing now. My name is Emma Campbell, and I am the co-convener of Alliance for Choice in Belfast. And I recognise a lot of names and faces. So hello, everybody, and welcome. We are absolutely honoured and thrilled that we have Richard here with his book about the experience that himself and his wife Denise went through. Richard is a photographer. He is someone who went through the painful loss of a baby. And he's also been a really incredible campaigner. Denise and him have turned up to all sorts of things, all places across the country at the drop of a hat. Susan is a journalist and a writer, and has always written about feminist issues, including abortion rights. Susan met Denise a couple of years ago when she was interviewing Denise for The Observer. And Susan was also the founder of the first rape crisis centre in Belfast. So we're really pleased Susan's here to talk to Richard. And so without any further ado, Richard, I'll let you begin.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Susan, as well. I'm really grateful that you could come along and help out with this. I know you're in the middle of your own book at the moment as well, so I really appreciate your time. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to quickly whiz along and see who's here. Yeah, very good. Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to show a short video, and the video is on my webpage, and it sets the scene for the book, and it shows a little bit about Denise and I and our stories. So I will try to share it. So some of the themes, there's going to be no graphic imagery, but some of the themes might be upsetting. So if it becomes too much, you can leave, or you can mute or something like that. I'm just going to have a look here. Right, almost there. If you can't hear it, tell me and I'll turn the volume up a bit. I hope you can see that.
In June 2016, my wife Denise gave birth to our only child, Alenia. This event has had a profound effect on both of us and changed our lives forever. In November 2015, we were delighted to discover that Denise was pregnant. Simultaneously, there was mounting pressure on the Northern Ireland Assembly to change the abortion laws. In the same month, the High Court ruled that the law which prohibited abortion in cases of fatal abnormality and rape was a violation of a woman's right to personal autonomy and breached Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, respect for private and family life. This ruling triggered a series of court cases and campaigns which ran parallel with our own personal tragedy. We were told at 19 weeks that our baby could be incredibly ill. After tests, we were informed that she would die during pregnancy, during birth, or shortly after being born. If she survived birth, she would be in incredible pain and offered pain relief until she stopped breathing. Northern Ireland was the only part of the UK where terminating a pregnancy was illegal in almost all circumstances, including rape and fatal abnormalities. Women and girls had to travel to England to access abortions in private clinics. Denise was too ill to travel, so was forced to continue with the pregnancy. Alenia died in utero at 35 weeks and 3 days. She was born 5 days after death. We buried her 4 days later. There was a maximum penalty of life imprisonment for any woman who had an abortion, for anyone assisting them, and for any doctor who performed an abortion. Denise and I were met with silence and resistance at every stage once we were told about the fate of our daughter. Sadly, our circumstances were not unique in Northern Ireland. People have been campaigning for change in Northern Ireland for over 50 years, and as the gravity of our desperate situation unravelled, we too became actively involved in campaigning for change.
I've really suffered mental torture, and I've just not been able to get back on track again. And we spend every day grieving for her. It's always in our mind.
I could never, ever accept that it's okay to force a woman to carry a dying fetus until it's born as a dead baby.
This shouldn't be happening to anybody. It really affects me deeply to know that other women have gone through that and will still go through that, and nothing is still being done.
The publisher Cara Falag is collaborating with me to create this very special photo book, which is a response to the sorrow I feel for Alenia and the deep sadness that I feel for Denise. It is about living in the political landscape of Northern Ireland, a place to which Denise was desperate to return, and a place that I'm still seeking to understand. By supporting this project, you will be helping us to contribute another voice to the debate around choice for women. You will help to highlight the injustices which women were subjected to in Northern Ireland and worldwide. Denise and I were faced with a heart-rending decision, and at a time when we were at our most vulnerable and in need of assistance, we encountered obfuscation and silence. Okay, so that pretty much sums up our journey up to the point of today, really. So I'll talk a little bit about the book and how I approached making the book. I'll also share another screen here. 1 second. Right. Hopefully you can see just the black square now, is that right? Yeah, okay. Okay, so from an artistic or photographic perspective, I was, trying to figure out how to make work around all of the things that I was experiencing, because I needed to make the body work from my perspective, because obviously I couldn't speak for Denise. And for a long time after the baby had died and then was born, I couldn't really do anything at all. I mean, Denise and I, we were in a pretty deep depression. And anybody who's ever suffered mental illness will know that when you're suffering with something as tragic as this, you just can't do anything. You can't find enjoyment on anything at all. So I just went out. Eventually, I picked up the camera and I just went out and I started making pictures. I really didn't have a clue what I was doing or what I wanted to picture, but I knew that I needed to do something. So I just went to places where I could avoid people, because one of the reasons was I just didn't feel like I was going to be good company for anybody. So I was actively trying to avoid people. And I took the camera along. And then I started to think about how I was feeling and how I could represent that through photography. And I was feeling a lot of anger and a lot of hatred. And I really wanted to hate this place, Northern Ireland. And it's illogical, because obviously it's not the place which causes the grief. It's the people who ultimately have control of the place who caused the trauma. And I wanted to make ugly photographs to mimic emptiness that I was feeling. And I was also looking to photograph an absence, or capture an absence, or a sense of absence and loneliness. But eventually I became more focused, and I thought about some of the things that brought us to this point. And I started to think about politics, and they, oops, it stopped. The politics and the healthcare and everything that we were going through here. So I also searched on the internet, and I was exploring the hypocrisy of how the law could be so different here to in England. And on the NHS website, it says that, so our baby was diagnosed with a condition called Edwards syndrome. and it's a fatal anomaly. There's different degrees of Edwards syndrome in severity, and our baby, she had the most severe form. It's called full Edwards, and it affects every single cell in the body. So what the advice on the NHS website read was, if your baby is diagnosed with Edwards syndrome during your pregnancy, your doctor will talk to you about how you want to move forward. They will discuss the options of either continuing with the pregnancy or ending it with a termination, as it is such a severe condition. This is a very difficult situation, and it is normal to feel a whole range of emotions. It may help to talk with your doctor, partner, family, and friends about what you're thinking and how you are feeling. If your baby is diagnosed with Edwards syndrome, either before birth or afterwards, you will be offered counselling and support. And there should be a little bit at the bottom which says, unless you live in Northern Ireland, when you'll get none of it. And I was struggling. I was trying lots of different strategies of trying to approach this work, and I was really struggling to find my voice, and I couldn't make any pictures which made sense. So I stopped and I just started writing, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I went right back to the beginning. And it was very painful, because it kind of, every time you write about it, and Denise would verify this as well, every time you write about it or every time you talk about it, it's as if you're reliving the trauma. But I wrote, and then I began to collect newspaper articles. So I would go to the library in Belfast, the newspaper library, and I would trawl through all these newspaper articles, and I built up a big collection of newspaper articles. And I had so many that the book was going to be too thick. It was. In fact, this is one of the dummies. It's like a phone book. It's horrible. It's thick and heavy and horrible. And I knew that there was too much information there. So I decided to go back to when Denise conceived, and that was around the autumn of 2015. And that was also around the time that the judgment Horner made the first ruling that abortion law here was incompatible with human rights. And then I picked out another article. This is a beautiful article. It's very succinct, but it covers, you know, if I was going to use a sleeve note, this could be it. It's so fantastic, and it fits nicely on the double spread as well. So the designer was happy. But this article was written just after the vote, and the vote was in February 2016, and that actually coincided with the time that Denise had the quadruple test, which confirmed that there could be a severe problem with the pregnancy. So it was almost serendipitous that these key events were almost working in line with our own personal tragedy. I also picked out this article. The headline grabbed me first of all: abortion laws skewing highest stillbirth rate in the North. And skewing became something that I would think about quite a lot, because it took me back to when Denise had to have an amniocentesis. And I was thinking about, you know, the big needle that goes into the tummy to draw out the amniotic fluid. But it also speaks about how the laws are affecting families and parents, because they're having to carry these babies with these terrible, terrible conditions to birth, and the babies are going to die. Then I looked at the appeal court, which reversed Horner's ruling. So again, everything went back in time. And then the Supreme Court. And I also wanted to kind of give a little recognition to some of the people who had given evidence in the Supreme Court as well. So I asked the designer to you know, highlight some sections of the text there. And then I finished with the MP's vote, which effectively led to the law change. And I had to stop somewhere, so I stopped there. How are we doing for time? Good, okay. So once I had I had the news articles, I was starting to think more about the process. I started to look at the photos again, and I revisited all of the images that I'd made. I made lots of little small prints. Any photographers here will be familiar with this scene. And I began to sequence them. And what I was doing is I was looking for any patterns in the work. And I started to put images together in sequence, which kind of spoke to each other. And then I started to try and establish links between other images. So either the kind of texture or the feel of the image. And then the way I work is the book is almost like a story. So what I try to do is I try to lead the reader through the book with pictures instead of words. And I started to use metaphors, and I sequenced them strategically in the book. So they're visual metaphors. And I also wanted to speak about patriarchy and control, and the need for travel for healthcare. And these two images for me, so the one on the left is actually contrails from an airplane. And the one on the right is the spire from Belfast Cathedral. And I always thought that spire is a really kind of aggressive thing to put on a church, I think. And then I was thinking about binary opposition, and I decided that a lot of the images should be black and white. So I'm thinking about light and dark, and this is a good example. This is a good example of binary opposition actually in one picture, because on the spire you have the light and the dark, you have the tree on the right, which is kind of doesn't show much growth or much life, versus the tree on the left, which is abundant, has an abundance of life. And I was thinking that quite often the conversation around abortion in particular gets diluted to right and wrong, or good or bad, bad and evil. And we all know that it's far more complicated than that. And we know that every single person who's considering an abortion is doing it for their own reasons. And they have their own histories, they have their own traumas, they have their own life. We know that. And it's not as simple as good and bad, or right and wrong. And then the few color images that we did put in the book, they're almost monochromatic anyway. There's not much color there. And I was very keen to not have a lot of color. And that was a symbolic choice, because to see color we need light, and Denise and I had very little light in our lives. And then I would use devices as well, which are repeated throughout the work. There's very few, well, the only people in the work are Denise and myself. And in fact, there's only one picture with me in it. Most of the photos are of Denise. So when I'm out walking around and I'm making pictures, I invent little stories and characters. And for me, the birds, these little hooded crows, they kind of represented, I know it sounds odd, they represented oppression. And they were kind of sinister. And then there's other birds within the work which represent freedom. And, we were trapped in this situation. I also was keen to show the passing of time when Denise was pregnant. So there's a sequence of images which show Denise's maternity trousers at various stages through the pregnancy. And then I was also thinking about life and death and the cruelty of nature. So in the book, again, there's some repetition, and the rabbits actually, when I saw this rabbit, and then I went back and I saw it again, and then I went back a few days later and I saw it again. And there's this same rabbit in different parts of the countryside. It is the same rabbit at different stages of decomposition. And when I made the pictures, I just made the pictures, and I didn't realize that actually rabbits would have a theme through the work as well. And I'll talk about that. I also made photographs in the hospital, and when I made those pictures, I didn't expect them to be included in any work at all. They weren't the kind of pictures that I would ordinarily use in an artwork. They were more kind of journalistic in style. But I had to make pictures anyway, just to record our time in the hospital. And at first I wasn't really thinking about including them in the work, but I went back and I looked at them, and I realized that by leaving them out, the work loses a lot of the personal touch. I don't know if you can see that. That's a picture of Denise with the baby, just after the baby was born. It's in the middle of the night, so it was pitch black. And I just had a little compact camera, so it's very dark. It's lighter in the book. But again, I was showing the passing of time. And then this is in the morning. And there's the basket with Elena in. And I talk a little bit about that in the book, in the text. And then also when I was looking at the edit for the work, I was acutely aware of photography, how it objectifies people. And I was acutely aware that there were no pictures of me. So I needed to redress the balance. And when I was going through the writing phase, I'd written an essay. In fact, in the dummy that I sent to Unseen, there's an essay in the back, and it's pretty formal and it's pretty terrible. So I started to think about how I could show my vulnerability within the book as well. And I decided to write a kind of prose poem. And it ended up in about 6 pages. So I'll try and read it to you. This is just one excerpt. It says, "For a moment it stops, no sound, silence pounding in my head so loud it hurts my eyes. The room is dark, black. The nurse holds the tiny baby aloft. I look, but I can't see. It's dark. She asks, 'Rich, what does she look like?' I can't see. I can see. I'm horrified. 'She's beautiful,' I lie. Emotion swells until I'm washed through with grief. I sob silently, screaming into the air. I can't make a sound. I don't want to upset her. The nurse mouths, 'Are you okay?' I lie again. A nurse comes. She's sincere, kind, thoughtful. 'Do you want some photos?' I think no. Denise says yes. We pose. Should I smile? I look like a freak, full smiling like a contented father, except I'm not. And I think what I was also trying to explore within the work is how people's coping mechanisms differ. And I was aware that, I was actively trying to distance myself from what was going on. Obviously, I was there for Denise, but in order for me to maintain some kind of mental health, I had to kind of distance myself, and so I would try and occupy myself with things which would take me off of it. And I was always aware that Denise couldn't, because obviously she was still carrying the baby, and the baby was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and everybody was congratulating her and asking her. So I wanted to explore how to show that we were going through the same experience, the same tragedy, but our experience of it was very, very different. And some of the photographs would illustrate that, because I'm in nature and I'm able to kind of take myself away for a little while. Whereas even if Denise was walking in nature, she would still have the baby there. So there was absolutely no escape. There was a lot of hypocrisy which I needed to put into the book. And one example, one of the exceptions to the law is that if there is a serious risk to a woman's mental health, then it's one of the exceptions. And if that happens, then she's supposed to be allowed to get a termination. Well, that's not true, because when we asked medical practitioners, they just said, well, we would medicate somebody. And the cruel irony is the medication is severe medication, which would harm the fetus. So it's nonsensical. I also wanted to show that after all of the struggle and all of the pain and all of the trauma, what we were left with and what it was all for and why we were forced to go through this. And, we have a few things that remind us, and this is a blanket, that's Elena's blood on it. And every year the blood kind of starts to disappear because it's drying up and it's falling off. You get given a box and in the box there's little things that you have to fill out. So I'll talk a little bit about our activism. This isn't in the book. You know, there was never going to be any photographs of rallies and marches that we went to. It just wasn't something that I felt I could put into the, these people to do that work far better than I can. I wanted the work to be more personal. But Denise was the driving force behind our activism. And you know, she got in touch with Alliance for Choice. She got in touch with lots of organisations who we joined on marches, and we went down and we saw Emma and we did some canvassing, which was hard as well, for Repeal the 8th in the South. In fact, on the first time we went, it was so traumatic. I actually got home. We drove home from Drogheda, and I actually vomited in the toilet. It was pretty intense because we had the idea that we would just tell people what happened to us in the hope that it would kind of trigger something and make them think a little bit more deeply about the repercussions for people, and not just for women, for men as well. And every time you're telling somebody about it, it's quite traumatic. So we spoke to MPs, and I took this book. This is the book. Can you see that, or can you only see my, yeah. So this is a book, and inside the front cover, there's a mind map. Oops. So this book has some pretty shocking images in it, and I didn't want to force anybody to look at the really kind of horrific images. But the one picture that I wanted all of the people we spoke to look at was that mind map, because it was so important. And it didn't even matter if they couldn't read it. Visually, it shows you what we were trying to figure out. And this was before we even knew everything that we were going to go through. And it became the cover of the book. And even that was a tough decision. I was always keen for that to be a key part of the book. And initially I put it on the end papers. So in one of the dummies that I made in the telephone directory, it's on the end papers there. And it's on the back as well. And then when I was looking at the book, I thought, you know, it's quite important. And Denise and I, we discussed it for a long time. We discussed most of the pictures. I didn't want to put anything in the book that Denise was unhappy with. But I will admit, you know, sometimes I had to persuade her, you know, that the images were going to be included. And this was a really tough one because it's really, really personal. And that's it. I'll stop sharing. That's me.
Thank you so much, Richard. I have a copy of the book here, and I can tell you that it's incredibly powerful and incredibly moving. If you weren't already moved by Richard talking about the experience of making the book and the experience that they went through already, I'm going to ask Susan to have a chat with Richard now. So thanks, Richard, for that. That was really insightful. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you very much, Richard, for going through the book and its genesis with us in that very personal way. It's a tremendous achievement. I haven't actually physically got my hands on a book yet, but you did send me it online, and it is very, very powerful and kind of extraordinary, isn't it, for an artist to end up writing themselves into their work in that way. Is that the first time that you'd ever done work which was that personal?
Actually, it's not, unfortunately. It's the first time I've ever written in a work, but you know, I have made other work, which is challenging as well, about personal experiences, but never in a text. I've never combined text and images before. And, you know, that was different, and it was difficult to try and figure out how to do it. And as I said, I wrote this essay and it just didn't sit. And I'm so pleased that I didn't put an essay in the book, because the text just suits the book a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting, I thought, that you were saying about asking Denise about the images and so on, because I was kind of fascinated by the fact that you mentioned that, in fact, at several stages, it was Denise who said, yes, we want pictures. You know, we want pictures of Alenia, and we want pictures of you and I, you know. So in some ways, Denise wanted that record.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
the person who...
Yeah, Denise is there. I don't know if she wants to say anything, or I can speak. And okay, yeah. So I mean, there is one photo of Alenia in the book, and it was a very, very difficult decision about whether to include her and how to do it as well. So I mean, I discussed with the designer different strategies for including the book, and one idea was to have a little envelope, a small envelope stuck with a small photo which you could take out. And then I spoke with Denise about it, and we thought, well, no, maybe the photo could get lost or mislaid, and we didn't really want a picture just floating around. And there was another idea to kind of have, it's called a Japanese bind, and it's where two pages, the pages are sewn into the spine of the book, and they're also joined together, so you can see through them, but you have to physically cut the pages to open it. So that was another idea. And then I was keen that Alenia would be linked to the blanket. So I asked, I don't think Lorraine is here, the designer. So I asked if we could have some kind of folding page, and it's called a gatefold. And basically the page, it crosses over on itself again. So you see a photograph of the blanket, and then you can open the blanket, and then on that page there's a letter, and then on the other page there's a photo of Alenia. And it was difficult to decide whether to do that, because, you know, we're not in the business of upsetting people, but also I needed to say, you know, this is our daughter as well. And this is the kind of environment that Denise and I and people like us are in, because, okay, we are avidly pro-choice, but we are also suffering baby loss. And we know lots of people who are suffering baby loss. And we also know lots of people who are suffering baby loss that have a different opinion about choice to us. And I get it. I get their pain, and I get their agony. I just don't agree with their stance, because it would be wrong for me to say to somebody, this happened to me and it's the worst thing ever and it's so terrible, so therefore nobody else is allowed to decide what they do with their lives and their bodies. It's you know, it's just wrong. It doesn't sit with me very well.
I think it's really important that you've used the photograph, and it's strange because in ways, you know, when you talk in the text there, you read it out, where you say the thing about, you know, I lied, I said she's beautiful. I mean, she is beautiful. She's got beautiful red lips, and she's absolutely lovely. And and then it's horrific as well, because she has been dead. And it's a picture of a not just a dead baby, but a little girl who's been dead for a few days. And that is shocking and disturbing. But I just felt it's important, because one of the things you've talked about all along, both yourself and Denise, is the silence and the hiding and the not being allowed to talk about what's really happened. And this is about a baby, isn't it? It's about a woman who's going to have a much wanted baby, and it's about a man who really wants to be a dad, and it's about the two of you. And really brave and good to have the photograph. But do you both find that it's painful for you to have that there in the book, or is the book healing to both of you in some way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I spoke a little bit about how Denise and I coped differently, and Denise, she has a box where you get given a memory box, and you make footprints, and there's little things and toys and stuff, and you keep one and you put one in the coffin. And Denise would often go to the box. She still does. She goes to the box and she finds comfort in that. For me, it's too traumatic. I can't do it. And Denise would be buying photo frames. She was always buying these photo frames from the charity shops all the time. And she'd be saying to me, print a picture, print a picture. I don't have many pictures. And it was really difficult for me. And I could see that, you know, our coping mechanisms were so different. And it wasn't until I was making the work and I was having to look at this picture of Lenya all the time, and there was a profound moment when actually, for the first time, I felt that I connected with her. And, you know, I never held a Lenya at all. I just couldn't do it. And it was really hard for me to make footprints and handprints and stuff like that. I mean, it was really, really horrible. But I looked at the picture and I did feel a connection, and it was something that I'd never felt before. And I suppose if I'd not made the book, I may not have had that connection.
So, and just in terms of healing, is it a healing process? Do you think it's something that has helped you, or is it just something that you needed to do, but it hasn't actually changed the pain that you experience? It's
actually been horrendous making the work. It's really, really been traumatic and terrible, and I've been sick, and it's really, really been hard. And, you know, people talk about art as therapy. Well, this certainly, if this was therapy, then you know, you wouldn't want to go to this therapist. But I do feel now, because some people are getting, I had a few books, and some people are receiving their books now, and they're writing to me, and that actually is really helping.
One of the things that I felt, it came across from the book, but also when I met you and Denise before and interviewed you, you know, where you talked in the interview with me that whenever it emerged that the baby had this terrible likely outcome, one of the medical professionals said to you, you can always go to the mainland. And Denise knew what that meant and you didn't. And in some ways you've explored that in the book, haven't you? In some ways for you it was a finding out what Northern Ireland is and what your connection with Northern Ireland is.
Yeah, it is.
It was a place apart.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was difficult for a lot of reasons. I mean, we hadn't been in Northern Ireland that long, and we weren't really familiar with this situation. And I think a lot of people, I mean, some people who I've spoken to have lived there all over their lives, they still don't even know that, you know, that there's this issue. So it was difficult. Sorry, Susan, I've forgotten what you asked.
No, it's just it's just about it appears that part of the thing that the book is about is you coming to understand Northern Ireland and how different it actually is, but also, you know, you mentioned about wanting to hate it, but
yeah,
actually the book seems to have been in some ways a coming to terms with realizing that it isn't about geography and it's not about the things you see here, it's about the people who have power here, who are behaving in a cruel and, as Denise put it, torturing way towards women in these situations.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I knew Denise was desperate to move back here, and it was devastating that, I mean, from the moment I met Denise, she was always enthusing about Northern Ireland. She really was. And we would visit, and I could see why. I mean, it's beautiful. And I mean, I could give you so many anecdotes of how the people are so lovely, and you just don't get that where I came from. silly things like once I was in the queue in Tesco's in Arts, and there was a big queue behind me, and I'd been looking for ice, you know, bags of ice. I've been looking around for bag of ice, and there was a massive queue behind me. And I said to the guy on the checkout, you know, do you sell ice in bags? And you know what he did? He actually got up, and there was this massive queue. He got up and he walked around to the freezers, and I was thinking, shit, you know, all these people are going to be freaking out. And then he came back with his bag of ice. And it's things like that. And this would happen all the time. And I can understand why Denise was desperate to move back, because where we were in Southeast England, the pace is fast and there's just not that personal interaction. But also there's something about people who have lived in a highly politicized environment, and there's a depth there. And you feel it in people, and they're genuine. And, you know, this place is so fucked up because it is so beautiful, the people are so lovely, but also, and this is what I was trying to get my head around, that there's a lot of things about this place that really epitomize everything I hate in mankind. And I'm saying mankind because it is mankind. There's so much about it I hate, and it become really highlighted when we were going through this situation. It was something that I really struggled with, and I struggle with it now even more than I did, you know, when we first arrived.
Well, I mean, I think the last time that I actually met you and Denise was probably at Stormont on the day in 2019 when Stella Creasy's new law decriminalising abortion for Northern Ireland came through, and there was a real feeling of happiness that day and fulfilment, and that, you know, finally all the struggles that people had gone through to get the law changed had come to something. But of course it's back in the news again now because the Northern Ireland Executive is trying to roll back on the legislation. And when I interviewed Denise, she talked about having a deep, almost in the bone anger, you know, about the situation that you found yourselves in. And I wonder, do you still feel that intense anger when you see the fact that even though we're supposed to have an abortion law, we actually haven't got it yet? It hasn't been implemented.
Yeah, you know, when things like this happen, I mean, I saw Emma, I can't remember where it was, when it was, there's a vigil for Savita in Belfast, and I don't know if Emma remembers, but, you know, she came up, she gave us a hug, and it's always great to see Emma because, you know, she's always a force and she's lovely, and I don't know, you meet people and it just lifts you. And I said to her, you know, this is never going to be over. And she said, I know. And I think people here know that. They know that there's people here that just will not let go of it. And it is really, really upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
And it still makes me angry, yes. And when the news came out, you know, the DUP's latest stunt, you know, I wasn't surprised at all. I was disappointed. I wasn't surprised, but I also start to become angry then about the law. And you think, well, hold on a second, the law, what is going on here? If the law is supposed to have been changed, why isn't it being implemented? And then I lose faith in the legal system.
Yeah, it does seem endless. But I mean, the debate in Westminster this morning concluded that the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland intends to implement the law. So we'll have to see what the next chapter of that is. Just to finish, I'd like to ask you, what do you hope the book will do? Who do you hope the book will reach, and what do you hope its impact will be?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So, you know, there's some people who will never, ever listen to us, ever. Mm-hmm. There's people who will, and that's great, and I love you guys. And then there's people who haven't really thought about it. You know, they might think, oh, you know, well, you know, she's got pregnant, but they haven't really thought about it. And I think it's those people who just need a gentle nudge to say, look, you know, it's far more complicated than you're giving it time for. Please just think about it a little bit deeper, and think about the people who are going to be affected, and think about, it's not an easy decision for any person to even consider an abortion. And it pains me when people say, you know, they use phrases like abortion on demand as if it's just going to dentist, or, you know, it really upsets me, because I know that everybody who's considering it is considering it for a valid reason. And everybody who has an abortion, they deserve to be loved. That's it. Because it's tragic. And, you know, I don't want people to have abortions. I don't, but I understand that people need to. And I understand that everybody's circumstance is different. And it's not for anybody else to dictate how somebody else's life is affected. And let's face it, it's always going to be the woman who's going to be affected the most. We know that.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much, Richard. I think it's really wonderful that you've done the book. And just to conclude, I'd like to say that, you know, for me, interviewing yourself and Denise, it was profoundly moving. And I think it's really amazing that Denise and Sarah Ewart and Ashley Topley and other women have laid their souls bare in the way that they have in order to try to change Northern Ireland. And it's really a magnificent and generous act. And I think your book is very much in that vein as well. So thank you so much. And I hope that it goes really, really well for you.
Well, thanks, Susan. You know, I really appreciate, I said to Denise, I really hope Susan does it, because, you know, you have such a lovely, calm manner. And whenever we see you, it's always in these most kind of, you know, Denise and I have got heightened energy and we're all feeling quite anxious. And then you're there with your calming tone, and you're always, I don't know, you're just so reasonable and lovely. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And lovely to see you, Denise, as well. Thank you very much. Back to you, Emma.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susan. So just for about 5 minutes now, if people are curious as to where we stand right now with the law. When Richard and Denise were going through their loss, the law hadn't changed, and we were still operating under a law that was over 150 years old, a law that has kind of left its footprint all across anywhere that was colonized by Britain, essentially. So Sierra Leone, I noticed that comes up in the book, Richard. It's like Sierra Leone, Australia, New Zealand had to change it, Canada had to change it. And I just find it really interesting that we were one of the last places in Europe to get rid of that 1861 Act. What the DUP motions that they've brought the last month or two on trying to get rid of the severe fetal abnormality clause is really galling, and I'm sure it must be galling to Denise and Richard. It is particularly galling to me because it's precisely what Susan said, the generous stories of people who went through such incredibly traumatic experiences. They are the reason for that clause. They're the reason that clause is needed. They're the reason, because no doctor can ever definitively prove that a pregnancy is going to end in a fatal abnormality. That is what the law is in the south of Ireland at the minute, and it means hundreds of people are still traveling over to England. Hundreds of people from here have still traveled over in the last year to England, even though we now on paper have one of the best laws in the world. So what's really frustrating is the DUP are having this debate in Stormont, even though they know it will have no discernible effect on the primary legislation. It can't actually change the primary legislation. So we're always very curious as to why they're doing it. You know, why make a public debate and traumatize people in this way? And it sounds incredibly cynical, but there's an election coming up and the DUP aren't doing very well. No, they're talking about disability, but in actual fact, they haven't done anything for disabled rights and disabled people's rights in a very long time. We are hoping that the intervention of the Secretary of State in the next 6 days will make a difference and will make the Department of Health commission services. There are doctors and nurses and consultants all across Northern Ireland that really do want to treat women and their families and really do want to offer this healthcare. So we're crossing all our fingers and toes and hoping that'll happen. If anybody has any questions for Richard about the book or about anything else, either put your camera on or put your audio on or put your hand up?
You.
I just want to say thanks, Richard. It was lovely to hear your voice again.
And you, how you doing?
Studying together, it was really lovely, yeah. And I knew there was a lot of work gone in there and hard work. That was great.
Thanks, Katrina.
To hear your voice again. That's all. Thanks.
I would just like to also comment. I'm sorry about the noise in the background. My dog has been let out of his crate and he's trying to eat my leftovers. But as someone from the reason I got into abortion activism in Northern Ireland was through photography. When I'm very similar to you and Denise, I really wanted to move back here after living in London for a long time. And when I moved back, I was incredulous that it was still illegal essentially here in almost all circumstances. But when I was trying to make work, it was, there's no work, or there's more now, but at the time, 10 years ago, there was no work about abortion. There was certainly no work about abortion in Northern Ireland. So even just the fact that this book exists, Richard and Denise, is really incredible and really powerful, and it's really important at the time that it was made. It's going to be a piece of history, and I think he's probably underplayed quite a lot the really significant part that you both have contributed to that, so I just wanted to add that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Can I try to end on a more upbeat note, because I'm aware that I'm assuming we're ending, right? I'm aware that it's been quite traumatic. I'm just going to try and share something here. I was pointed to an article in, can you see that? Can you see what there's like some text? Yes. Okay, so there was an article, and this is supposed to be the first ever online art newspaper. And at the bottom of the article, it has some text about the book, and then it has some of the text. For those of you who have seen the text, some of it is quite intense. And at the very bottom, it has a little bio from me. And I'll just read it out to you. It says, Richard Ian Gosnold is a photographic artist based in Northern Ireland. His practice, blah, 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 blah. Gosnold holds an MFA from the Belfast School of Art, Ulster University. The food is rubbish. The toast is good. White toast, salty butter. So obviously somebody hasn't done a very good job proofreading. And in case there's anybody here from UU Catering, I just want to apologise, because I have nothing against your toast or your food. And then, Emma, I wanted to pay tribute to Alliance for Choice as well, because on that day when we were all at Stormont, it was freezing cold. It was a beautiful, bright, sunny day. I remember that, because the contrast, I made some pictures and the contrast was phenomenal. But there was a point when Denise had been doing lots of TV interviews with people with camera shoved in her face, and it was trying and telling, and it had been quite, you kind of get into a frenzy, and there's lots and lots of cameras poked into your face. And then we were standing there, and there was just me, Denise, and Sarah and Jane, and we were standing there, and then there was the anti-choice. They'd been there all morning with their demonstration and their banners and their horrendous pictures. And they were standing there, and I was feeling quite alone. And then all of a sudden this coach pulled up, and I don't know if I've got any pictures, hold on. And I was feeling so low, and then the coach pulled up. Where is it? Sorry about this. And so this is the view from Stormont. So that little group here in the middle that's anti-choice, and here as well, I think. And then we were standing there feeling, you know, tired, and then all of a sudden the coach pulled up, and here we have one anti-choice demonstration, and then here they come. And it was so uplifting with all the banners and the flags and the chanting. It was just a wonderful thing, and it kind of lifted all of our spirits just when you guys arrived, and I don't know, it was just amazing. So thank you for doing that.
I had to borrow my dad's van to get to Stormont that morning because my car broke down with Ashley in the car on the way there. It's full of drama. Yeah. It was a very emotional day. Yeah, so if anybody else has any questions, I know there's some coming in the chat here. So Kathy has said, thank you so much for sharing your story, very powerful. And Sinead has said, thank you, Richard and Denise, for sharing your story. Claire Gallagher has said, thank you, Richard and Denise. Your openness over the past 5 years has changed a lot of minds for the better. The book is beautiful and powerful. And Clara, amazing talk, and the book is really important. My mum went through something very similar over 30 years ago, and it's tragic we're still in the same position. Thanks. So I know you said that you wouldn't pay for that therapy, but I don't know if you'll ever be able to account for the really powerful effect that you'll have on other people. So I would really, really love to thank you for that in particular. And Denise as well, obviously. Denise. Now, you already sent the link around to the book, is that right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was really rude of me.
No,
but I know we've spoken about it, and I always forget to tell people. The publisher has asked me to sell a certain amount of books, so I have a shipment which should be right. I had a few which I've sent out to some people who got in very, very quickly. And I've got one left, which I should be sending down to Susan. And then I'll be getting a big shipment very, very soon, hopefully, fingers crossed, if the Northern Ireland Protocol does what it's supposed to do, because the books are coming from Germany. So I put a link up to my website, and there's a page. We decided not to do a Kickstarter. We thought about it. I'd made all the Kickstarter page, but we decided not to do a Kickstarter. So I've kind of mimicked a Kickstarter on my website. I've just stuck the link up again, and it basically, it talks about a lot of the things that we've discussed tonight. There's videos, there's something from Denise on there which is really powerful, and you know, it was really hard for us to talk to all the different politicians and groups and committees when we were speaking. And at the beginning, I was doing most of the talking, but then, you know, occasionally Denise would come, and completely unscripted, she would just let rip, and it really was truth to power. And I was so proud of her, because she can speak in a way that I can never speak, and it just comes to her, and she's just, there's no holds barred, and she's accurate, and she's on point with the law, and it puts the politicians to shame. It really does. So there's a little clip on that web page as well. It's a tiny piece. The piece is much longer, but there's a tiny piece as well. So, you know, by all means, please look at that, and you'll find out more about the book. And then you can always email me as well. And if you want to purchase a book, of course you can purchase it from the publisher. They're great. I love those guys. Very supportive. But if you purchase it from me, it means that I don't have to go to so many book fairs.
Richard, we're happy for Alliance for Choice to link the book on the website as well. Absolutely.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay. Oh, Denise, you want to speak?
So can I just say thanks to everybody for turning up tonight, and also for supporting us through this and supporting the cause. Thanks to Alliance for Choice and Emma in particular, not just for hosting tonight, but for supporting us and supporting women through this and families through this over many, many years. And also to Susan, again, for all the support she's given us and all the work she's done to fight this cause. And most of all, at this point, to Richard, you know, for what he's done. I know it was a real labour of love putting this book together, and it has, you know, put him through a lot of illness and a lot of sleepless nights. It's been tough, but it's been a good outcome, or hopefully it will be a good outcome for other people when they read it. There's something else I wanted to say I actually can't remember now, but just
I
that.
think I'm going to say that you love me, maybe.
Yes, that was it. And also, yes, I remember now the most important point, that I'm very proud of you for what you've achieved with this.
Stop.
But also, I think what many people won't know is that when you're praising me for being strong and being somebody outspoken, if it wasn't for the support that I've had from you personally through this, I would be in a very different place. And I recognize that as well. Whenever there are other women who don't have support in their lives, what they must go through is absolutely hell. And so I thank you for that, and for all the men who do stand by their women, and for the women who stand by their women too.
I think that's a really good point, you know, and I'd like to go further as well, because, you know, I get quite angry. I don't tend to watch a lot of local TV. I watch it when Emma's on. And, you know, and Susan will be on tonight as well. I think maybe she's gone. Yeah. So Susan will be on, what is it called? The View?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Susan will be on The View tonight with the wonderful Nuala
O'Lone.
Yes, beautiful.
Baroness O'Lone.
Yeah, very helpful. So, but, you know, what I would do is maybe I would catch up in the mornings. I'll get up and I'll look and I'll see Emma giving it some on the TV and feeling proud and emotional. But I've completely lost my train of thought again. I'm being too verbose here.
About supportive men, maybe.
Oh yes, and it annoys me because there's always one dick in the crowd that says, well, what about the men? What about the men? And, you know, hopefully, I mean, Susan asked who I hope to reach, so maybe some of the guys will read the book as well, and maybe they'll think about it. And what I would say is that, you know, when Denise and I, when we were trying to decide what to do, you know, when we were going through this, which is on the cover, when we were really sitting there, really racking our brains, and we were literally changing our mind every minute. You know, one time she would say, yeah, I think we should go and get the termination. And I'd be like, yeah, but, and then she'd be okay. And then I'd say, yeah, but, and we were kept constantly changing our minds. But ultimately, we were going to make this decision together, but it was always going to be Denise's decision. Mm. So whatever she decided to do, we would do. And one of the things that made me very angry was we weren't getting the support from the health service. We really needed it. We really needed it, and we just weren't getting it. And when there's a law which stops medical practitioners helping their patients, it's got to be a bad law. And you get these men saying, what about the men? What about the men? And I would say to the women, if your partner, your husband, your father, your cousin, whatever, if they're not going to support you in your time of need, then you need to consider that relationship. That's it.
Thanks, Richard. And thank you, Denise. Thanks for coming, everybody. Please go and have a look at the book, and please buy the book. I'm really thrilled, like I said before, that there's another piece of work, because there's not enough work about it, and the kind of vacuum left by silence means that they can fill it with all sorts of nonsense as well. So I'm really, really just so, like Susan said, so glad that you have been generous with your own experience. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. And have a nice rest of evening, and don't watch The View if you don't want to be cross. Bye.
Bye-bye.